This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. The final show for 2015. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, doing his thing. Don't get the party favors out just yet. We got some stuff that we got to talk about. But, we like to do our thing up in here. And so I'm not even going to waste any time. I got to bring out my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, Don Mad contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna and PNC, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Did you watch all of the games on Christmas Day, brother?
I watched 4 out of 5 games. I did not stay up for the Lakers and Clippers. I watched a little bit of that. Then I was like, man, this is brutal. So I just kind of turned that off and decided to do something else. But overall, Christmas Day was a joyous time for NBA fans out there. I think most of the games were competitive and pretty good. Starting at noon o'clock, if you were listening to us last week. But salute and all.
Exactly. Hey, listen, we made sure I bet you a few listeners also got it in there, got their heads right, got their minds right about that. They were noon o'clock. If they didn't get it at noon, they got it at something on the o'clock. So
that's right. Noon o'clock is a new talk for 2016. So make sure you get that down
early.
But salute to all the fans and listeners of the Baseline. Happy holidays, happy New Year, the whole nine. Glad to be with you on this final show for 2015. Lots in store for 2016 as the NBA season moves forward.
Yeah, definitely, man. One thing I wanted to ask you, Shaw, was the hype of the Bulls Thunder, hype of the Cavaliers and the Warriors game, was it worth the billing?
I enjoyed the OKC Bulls game a little bit more than other people did.
And not clearly because we were hyping that up to be the game to watch for.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being, pretty competitive, but it's just good to see Chicago out there really kind of doing their thing on the road. It was, kind of unexpected, if you will. The Golden State Cleveland game, I did not enjoy as much again, I just thought it was going to be hard for that game to live up to expectations, but it was ugly. There wasn't a lot of offense going on. Curry goes out for a little while with the calf injury and things like that. So it just wasn't quite what I was expecting and what I was hoping, but it still ended up being relatively competitive and a decent game. But I still enjoyed, I think, OKC and Chicago the most of all.
I think it became a little bit more mundane because of Steph Curry and LeBron James really not having as much of an impact. We saw spurts of that. And I thought that, clearly because Kyrie Irving, only came back for like a few games, we were going to see 100% Kyrie Irving. And of course, Kevin Love, disappeared out of the shadows in that game, so to speak. And, so it just became more of the role players and more of the hype of playing in Golden State. So I agree with you there, Shaw. But yeah, the Bulls Thunder game, I really enjoyed because one thing that you will not be disappointed in is Russell Westbrook's refusal to lose games, especially at home. So you will always see him go hard for however long he's out there on the basketball court. And to see him and Jimmy Butler, even to see some shots from Kevin Durant, Paul Gasol make some quality plays, I just really like that. I just felt like it was a much more grittier game. So great stuff all around. And we have an excellent show to bring to the table for you and yours. Once again, we appreciate everyone hollering and listening and tweeting and letting us know how they feel about the stuff we discuss here on the Baseline NBA podcast. You know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. But we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_the baseline, hashtag up the baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. We're available on all the major platforms, available on Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, iTunes, and Player FM. So be sure to download any one of those and allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the association. This week, we got our man, Tim Tompkins, jumping on, helping us discuss the state of affairs with the Phoenix Suns. The segment of The Drop, we got our man Blake. We got talk about things happening with Mark Jackson and Steph Curry. Is there apparent beef? And we'll also talk a little bit about the situation regarding Blake Griffin's injury and how this is going to impact the Los Angeles Clippers. All that in our coveted Coast to Coast, where we discuss the news that is happening in the association. So we have got so much to discuss and so much to get into. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. You know how we do. You know how we like to set it off. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast this week. And I'm so excited. I mean, I feel kind of bad, Shaw, because I really feel like if we were saying we're going to do it right for 2016, he would be our first, guest to roll into the 2016. But you know what? it's only right that he ends everything off properly with so much of the NBA hype happening in the last few weeks, especially after the Christmas Day games. It's only right that we bring our man, Tim Tompkins. He's one of the hosts for one of the most exciting podcasts that discusses NBA basketball next to ours, the DriveandDish Podcast. You always check these guys out via Twitter. They've got their website. They are just always on point with their analysis and their perspective regarding the game of basketball. Man, Tim, thanks for hopping on with us this week and joining us here on the Baseline, man.
Oh, I'm absolutely honored to be back on. So what do you guys think of the Heat Pelicans game? Was that an exciting enough finish to start Christmas Day games for you?
They were teasing us. I don't know how Shaw might have felt, but I felt that they were teasing us. I said, if this is how, you know, the Christmas Day games are supposed to start, because usually when you're starting to have that Christmas dinner, it's the early afternoon, right? So I was already, you know, putting myself, you know, in a world of trouble to make it to my aunt's house by sitting here trying to watch this basketball game. But when I know I need to cross over 2 states in order for me to get down to sit down for Christmas dinner, I would have put myself in so much trouble. I'm blaming Pat Riley, Dwayne Wade, and Anthony Davis and company for that kind of nonsense. They should never do that on Christmas Day.
Well, I didn't mind.
Are you guys worried? Are you guys worried about the lack of shooting for the Miami Heat?
I am. I mean, I think, you know, we've had this discussion about where they are, and yet they seem to be, the chemistry seemed to be one of the biggest issues they had coming in. But I think they realized that they need to get some shooting, some 3-point shooting, because I think I was on you guys' show when talking about how they wanted to do the whole, you know, pace and space thing and all that. And they have guys, if you leave them open, they can hit some shots. But it just hasn't really happened for them and hasn't translated for them from the 3-point mark so far. So we'll see. You know, Riley's he's a dealer, man. We'll probably make some moves out there. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff that between now and the trade deadline, so we'll see what Pat Riley's able to do.
I'm just more worried about Goran Dragic. I still don't see that aggressiveness from him. That's been my and again on a primetime game, Christmas game, I know that it's about Dwayne Wade, it's about Anthony Davis, but you paid a ton of money to re-sign Goran Dragic. I'm still not seeing, you know, quote unquote, the dragon, you know, come out, you know, out of Miami. You know, this fire and brimstone. He made a big huff about, you know, not, you know, him leaving Phoenix. I would have figured that there would be a different mentality about him playing next to an aggressive player like Dwayne Wade, where that part of him comes out and he really, because look, Chris Bosh is going to be Chris Bosh. You know, he'll have those games where he'll give you 30, then he'll have games where he'll give you 10. So to me, it just really falls on the guard play, and Dragic has got to be that guy. And I think that there are ways that he can do that without having to score 35 points, but I'm just still not seeing that aggressiveness from him.
Well, Goran Dragic left the Suns because Eric Bledsoe was bringing the ball up the court, and so Goran Dragic was just sitting in a corner the whole time. So he went to go over to the Heat, and now it just seems like he's in the exact same scenario, but instead of it being Eric Bledsoe, it's Dwayne Wade. So I wonder how much of that falls on the Heat and not so much Goran Dragic. But yeah, in that Christmas Day game, I think he had 7 points and like 6 assists. It was really underwhelming.
Yeah, man. It's interesting to me when you look at how that team is somewhat structured. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up Eric Bledsoe, because, you know, this is exactly one of the reasons why we have you on here, is to help us give us some insight now with regards to the state of affairs with the Phoenix Suns. I mean, you know, I would love to see this Phoenix Suns at some point be considered one of those teams that we want to see play on Christmas Day. And I don't want it to be where it's a happenstance of the scheduling because they have to play in Oklahoma City. I want it to be because they have an exciting brand of basketball. No question that they've got some interesting players on their team. And given the last few days, you know, it's been I want to use the word tumultuous, because that's exactly what it is. Going from the situation with Markieff Morris and head coach Jeff Hornacek to now finding out that they're losing, you know, they're arguably their best player on the basketball court, and Eric Bledsoe, basically until All-Star break, and then losing to a Philadelphia 76ers team, which everyone has already resigned themselves to the fact it's possibly the worst basketball team in the history of basketball. You know, everyone's now got the 4-alarm blaze sounding off, Tim, and I got to get your perspective from this. What has these last 4 days been like for you, watching what this Phoenix Suns team has been able to do on and off the basketball court?
Well, I don't think it's just been the last 4 days. I think it's been the last month. But I mean, yeah, to your point, the Suns lost to the Denver Nuggets, who are on the second night of a back-to-back, and were playing without 5 rotational players, 2 of which were starters. You know, they lost to the Bucks. Then they lose to the Sixers, and it's been dark. There were some comments by PJ Tucker saying, if they don't turn it around, it's going to get bad really quick. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games, and their next 3 are not against easy teams. It seems like this is one of those things where the coach is going to get the hammer fallen for the lack of awareness and the lack of effort from their players.
Well, there's a lot being discussed about that specifically. I think even Wojo put out something that management is meeting with the coaching staff and meeting with the players to kind of figure out what's going on, because Coach Hornacek has a really good relationship with Sarver and Ryan McDonough, and they apparently, according to Wojo, they want to give him every opportunity to succeed in this. But you as a fan, you as a media person, and someone who's very close to what Phoenix is doing, do you blame Coach Hornacek at all for anything that's going on right in their downward spiral currently?
I think the blame is with everybody. I mean, if you look at the team last year when they did the exit interviews, the one thing that pretty much everybody said coming out, all the players said coming out, is we need some more veteran leadership. So they went in the offseason, they signed Ronnie Price, they signed Tyson Chandler, they still have PJ Tucker, they signed Weems, who has been great overseas. But that leadership isn't translating to the players, and there's only so much that the coach can do. Now, sure, a lot of his lineups are really suspect. And whenever he draws up an out-of-bounds play, it seems like the Suns aren't able to execute it. So you have to wonder, is this the player's fault or is this the coach's fault? But at the end of games, when you are consistently losing at the end of games and you can't execute, it seems like at least part of that has to be because the team is not well coached.
Tim Tompkins joining us here, the Drive and Dish Podcast. At Drive and Dish NBA is their Twitter handle. Great show. Him and his brothers do their thing. Tim, one of the things that I think that's also been leaked out, and I think now has been somewhat being, it's either rumored or confirmed through Mark Stein, because he tweeted this out, is that there's speculation about Jeff Hornacek's position now being under an immediate threat. And so to me, this sounds like this is like, cleaning house type scenario. That it's not just the players, that it's also the management of this, and it's really just the culture right now. It's not a good feeling if you're a Phoenix Suns fan, and if you're someone a part of the Phoenix Suns organization right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was hired back in 2013, and then the Suns went on that surprise 48-win season. Since then, they've missed the playoffs every single year, and not all of this can be blamed on Hornacek. So a lot of this has to do with attitude in the locker room. So a few days ago, Markieff Morris, who I think everybody even knows what happened to Markieff Morris over the summer, but I'll just recap it for you. The Morris twins got into an aggravated assault felony charge that they still have pending. So the Suns traded his brother Marcus Morris. They went after LaMarcus Aldridge, who would have in fact replaced Markieff Morris. Markieff Morris demanded a trade. The Suns decided not to do so. And since coming back, he's been terrible on the court, although everyone is saying how great he's been off the court. A few days ago, he was taken out of the Bucks game because he was negative 13 in 12 minutes or something like that. And he threw a towel at Jeff Hornacek. And he's since been suspended for a couple of games. It's costing him around $150,000. But when you have a personality like that in the locker room, it's infectious. And the team has to clean house on that. So there's two schools of thought, and one is that this is the players' fault, and the other one is it's because the team isn't well coached. But they aren't playing to how good they are, and you can't go and replace all the players. The one thing you can do is replace the coach. So do you replace the coach mid-season and try and get somebody to come in, or do you let the season ride out, get that high draft pick, and then replace the coach during the summer when the players have time to acclimate the new offense?
Do you think, though, given this situation, that there is an attitude problem in the locker room, and always the coach is always the first person to get blamed in these types of situations? But would a new coach help the situation specifically for Markieff? Would they still then try to make it work, or would they still try to move him out there? And have you heard anything regarding Markieff being moved to any potential teams?
It's not going to fix it. To answer your question, Markieff isn't just mad at Hornacek. Hornacek is the one that traded his brother. That's on Sarver and Ryan McDonough. Hornacek doesn't have anything to do with that. The playing time, obviously, Hornacek has something to do with. But I do think it's infectious, and I do think that the Suns have to move Markieff. And I don't believe that getting a new coach will make Markieff happy, and they're going to have to sell for pennies on the dollar, because at this point it becomes an addition by subtraction thing for him on the court. They brought in players for veteran leadership. Their two best players on the court are Brandon Knight and Eric Bledsoe, and they aren't particularly outspoken players. And when you also have a coach who's a pretty soft-mannered guy, you have to get a louder voice in there. And I'm not sure that replacing the coach halfway through the season is going to fix it, but maybe given the personnel that the team has, getting a coach like Tom Thibodeau, or obviously they can't go out and get Scott Skiles, but getting a louder voice out there that can inspire the players if the players aren't going to police themselves. And you'll have a lot of situations where the coach needs to get the players fired up. And so coaches will intentionally get a technical foul drawn in a game. But Jeff Hornacek has said that he's not going to get a tech just for the sake of getting a tech. But I think sometimes, and maybe now, they need a coach who is willing to do that.
Tim Tompkins joining us here, host of the DriveandDish Podcast. Be sure to catch Tim on the Twitter at RadioTimNBA. Tim, it seems like the tipping scale was the loss to the Philadelphia 76ers, because now there's just a flurry of messages being thrown across all social media outlets about the state of affairs regarding the Phoenix Suns. And I don't want it so that the attention is completely focused on the situation with Markieff Morris. I think that was probably the match that was lit because of, and what we're now looking and focused on. But when you saw that game between the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers and the way that they lost that game, what were the things that stood out most importantly for you that really frightened you about the future regarding the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah. The whole time I'm watching the game, for anybody that also listens to the DriveandDish podcast, they'll know that Kevin and Justin are huge Sixers fans. And the whole time I'm just thinking, for the love of God, don't let the Suns lose this game, because I'm never going to hear the end of it. I guess the Suns got 45 open looks and they only made 18 of them. The one thing that stood out, it's from the players, we've seen a lack of effort, a lack of intensity. Sometimes they overhelp when they shouldn't be helping, and they're leaving the players' most dangerous shooters wide open to shoot these jump shots. But a lot of this, Jeff Hornacek has been coaching like a coach who knows that he's on the hot seat, and he's putting in these lineups just scratching for any player that will give them some sort of energy into the game. And you'll see these lineups where there's one in particular where the Suns had gone on a run, and Philly was playing small, but the Suns had gone on a run, and he took Tyson Chandler out of the game. He subbed in Mirza Teletovic. The subsequent play, Mirza Teletovic missed a rebound, Philly scored, and he put back in Tyson Chandler, which has been how he's coached this entire season, where he's incredibly reactionary to every single play that happens. And the players aren't getting continuity, and they aren't getting into a rhythm. And it just seemed like that game where if the players aren't in a rhythm, they'll go for, Devin Booker will go for 20 points one game and he'll get a DNP the next game. Mirza Teletovic will score 25 and then he'll play 5 minutes the next game. Players have to become in a rhythm, and it seemed like the substitutions he was making in game are one of a coach that's worried about losing his shot.
I think that's a great observation you've made there. And, I would love to get your opinion even kind of going now with the rotation, as Eric Bledsoe was going to miss a significant amount of time. And again, reports that it may be out as long as All-Star break. Devin Booker is a guy, is a name you mentioned there. Who is the person or players? I mean, I guess it is going to be by committee, but who are the players that you're looking at most now where they can now step up and really help this team if they can turn anything around? I think you go into the All-Star break and you keep competing. That being said, we've seen a lot of what Devin Booker can do. His maturity level for being the youngest player in the NBA, but when he's been thrown into those starting lineups, he plays timid. It looks like a level of competition that he's just not ready for. You have Archie Goodwin, who's in his third year. He's not a great shooter. He's really turnover prone, and he doesn't look like he's going to be. He's not. Archie Goodwin's not a future shooting guard for the Phoenix Suns. You have Ronnie Price, who is a great journeyman, and he's put his heart out there on the court. But at the end of the day, Ronnie Price isn't a great shooter. He fouls people regularly. He has a hard time staying on the court because he plays such aggressive defense. You have Sonny Weems, who they got over the summer, who is an all-star overseas, but he hasn't seen any playing time because he's not that effective. I think we're going to see a bye committee, and I also think that the end of the Suns playing small ball for 35 minutes a game is done, and they're going to have to play to their strengths,
which is Tyson Chandler and Alex Len, who in his third year has been excellent, and lineups of both John Lure and Mirza Teletovic on the floor.
Tim, you bring up an interesting point about playing to their strengths. And I just tend to wonder at times, when you look at the assessment of this talent, and Sean and I had talked about this before we actually had you on. And, if we had you on before we, we actually started recording this show, I think you had a million and one good points to probably throw into the mix. That I'm looking at this team, and I just begin to wonder what is really the focus and the direction of this team. I thought that it's interesting when they made them play to get Isaiah Thomas, because they were afraid of what was going to happen to Eric Bledsoe. When they tried to, I guess you could say, when they tried to make this experiment of the three-headed guard monster type thing work, that as soon as they get rid of Isaiah Thomas goes to Boston and makes the Boston Celtics, a better team, and they have their own three-headed monster to deal with as well too. What is the direction in the future for these two particular guys? Because from a talent perspective, minus Alex Len, I mean, that's it. That's who McDonough is kind of thrown out there to say this is where the Suns is going to be next 3 to 5 years. We have to work with. What kind of direction do you want to see with these guys?
I think for better or for worse, the core of this team is Eric Bledsoe, Brandon Knight, Tyson Chandler. They're kind of married to that. They have been really good on the floor together so far this season. I think they're the third or the fourth highest scoring backcourt in the NBA. They're younger players, though. They have TJ Warren, who can score in a multitude of different ways. They have Devin Booker, who I've been talking about, which I believe he has the highest true shooting percentage of any rookie in the NBA right now. I mean, he's shooting a little over 50% from the 3-point line. They're at some point, though, Devin Booker is going to be too good not to play, and I do see them moving one of their guards. But I think that the future of this team is Alex Len, TJ Warren, and Devin Booker, and one of those two guards.
So that's the, I guess the long-term future. But what do you see in the immediate future for this team? As we move forward the rest of the season, do you anticipate, I guess, firm answers here, do you anticipate Markieff being gone? Do you anticipate Coach Hornacek being gone? Where do you see the Suns finishing out the season?
Markieff is gone. The last time a player threw a towel at a Suns coach was back in the 70s. And that player was gone in 5 days. Markieff Morris is gone, and the Suns need to move him. And I believe that they're willing to throw in an asset to do it now. His trade value is as low as it's ever been. I think the Suns are going to move forward through the All-Star break and see where they're at. And if they aren't in a position where they have a real chance of making the playoffs, I think we're going to see some of their younger guns on the court for extended amounts of time in a really low-key Lakers-esque tank job.
That is our man Tim holding it down, and I know, man, it's hard, to holding the remote control, watching the Suns team kind of fall apart as you speak. But you, my friend, are the last pillar of light for them. I wish you were in the front office, seeing all and inspiring them to do better for your Phoenix Suns team, man, because Lord knows you cannot have Kevin and Justin next to you every single time having conversations about this that was like their NBA finals right there. And you have to endure this for the rest of the regular NBA season.
Man. It doesn't even matter if the Suns make the playoffs. At the end of the day, they're still going to say to me, yes, but the Sixers beat the Suns. I mean, it was the low of low. It made me not want to watch basketball anymore. I woke up and then the next day I no longer had that thought, but it hurts to lose to the Sixers.
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying that it's the pain of watching these type of games is supposed to feel good, but let's just say, yes, man, it makes you start recontemplating about your career choice moves, discussing NBA if it's the 76ers that's schooling your home team. Oh, man.
It does.
He is the man. He hosts one of the best podcasts that is going on right now, the Drive and Dish Podcast. Be sure to check him out at Drive and Dish NBA. Our man, Tim Tompkins, catch him on the Twitter as well, at Radio Tim NBA. Him and his boys, Kevin and Justin, always doing their thing. Man, look, Tim, we really appreciate you hopping on and really helping us discuss what is happening right now with this Phoenix Suns team.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I've been waiting to come on since I was on. It feels like a year and a half ago. So. Absolute honor to be on your guys' cast, and we'll have you both on before the end of the season ourselves, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, man. Listen, this will not be the first, and certainly this is not the first, obviously, and will certainly not be the last that we're gonna have you roll up, especially with the crew, man, because we love talking basketball with you guys.
Well, thank you. It's the feeling's mutual.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, The Baseline NBA podcast. A couple of interesting topics for us to claw into, Shaw, in this segment of The Drop. The first one is with reference to the Los Angeles Clippers getting word that their man, Blake Griffin, is now out indefinitely with what is apparently a partially torn left quadricep. Now, this obviously the outcome of this is that he's going to be out for a few games. He's supposed to be reevaluated in the next 2 weeks, and when we hear indefinite, that obviously means is they're going to take their time to make sure that their superstar is fully healthy. But Shaw, what does this do, and what does this mean for the Los Angeles Clippers? Can they survive without arguably their MVP in Blake Griffin?
Well, this is the second year in a row that he's had, another injury. Last year was a staph infection, I think it was, and he was out. And you really saw Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan step up during those times. And this year it's going to be a little bit different. Doc Rivers has a lot of guys he can plug out there, and they can play by committee, if you will. Josh Smith can play the 4. They can even play Paul Pierce at the 4 if they want to. Maybe you can get away with Wesley Johnson as a stretch 4 sometimes as well. But I think what it is, you're really going to see them rely on JJ Redick, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Jordan to pick up the offensive side of things. And Chris Paul will pass the ball and do some of the things that he does so well. But their schedule isn't exactly easy. It's not the toughest schedule in the world. I mean, they have the Wizards coming up, the Hornets, the Pelicans. They do get to the 76ers, but the Blazers, they get the Hornets again, the Heat and the Kings, roughly all within the next few weeks, and that's when Blake will be reevaluated. I am concerned about this, going beyond that 2 weeks time frame and then becoming kind of an indefinite thing because they're not built to really be competitive in the Western Conference without Blake for an extended period of time.
I mean, who do you think right now is going to really be able to take advantage of Blake Griffin not being a part of the starting lineup? Let me ask you this question. Who is it going to be from a starting lineup perspective that really is going to take advantage of this time? And who from the bench or the reserve role is going to be able to take full advantage of Blake Griffin's injury for the Los Angeles Clippers?
Well, in the first game, we saw Josh Smith start, but he ended up playing 5 minutes. And then Paul Pierce was really the biggest benefactor of that. So I don't know. I think Doc is going to really kind of play by field, if you will, which is how he says he coaches anyway. He might start Josh Smith and then do exactly what he did in the other game and play Pierce the majority of the minutes, or he might start Pierce, give Pierce some nights off, and then kind of rotate that 4 position. Either way, I think you're going to see it done by committee. But I think the guy who's going to get the most amount of run right now from the bench side of things, either way, minutes-wise, is going to be Pierce for as many minutes as he can handle. But then again, it's going to be Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan and Redick who pick up the offensive side of the basketball, and even Jamal Crawford a little bit as well.
Something that I'm just really interested in figuring out, Shaw, with regards to this chemistry between Josh Smith and Doc Rivers. Look, Doc Rivers is the one who pulled the trigger to get Josh Smith. I don't think that there was a ploy. I think he truly believes that he can contribute for this Clippers team, and we've seen spots where Josh Smith has actually been effective. But I've been watching, the way that Rivers has been using him recently, and let me ask you, maybe, I don't want to throw out conspiracy theories just yet, man. It's not 2016 where I can give you a litany of them, but should there be room for pause here with this relationship between Rivers and Josh Smith? Is it something that we should be looking at? Because I would have thought that that Rivers would have been using Smith a whole lot more for the Clippers to be more successful so far this season.
Yeah, to say Smith's minutes have been inconsistent would be an understatement. And even, again, you see in the first game that Blake was out, he started, like I said earlier, only played 5 minutes. The one good thing is that Smith seemed to still be into that specific game, even though he wasn't getting the minutes. And I don't think you're going to see Smith moved immediately, because he was rumored a couple weeks ago to be on the trading block along with Lance Stevenson. With Blake's injury now, I think you're going to see that on pause for right now. But there is something up with that relationship and what you thought Smith was going to be able to bring to this Clippers team. Doc Rivers doesn't seem to have that trust in him just yet, but the Clippers are a team that seemed to start to play better towards the end of the season and like around after All-Star break for whatever reason. That has been kind of their trend For the last couple of years, they seem to get hot around that time. And I think that's the same thing. I think Redick said that last year. Is like, listen, we're going to figure it out. And it just seems to take them a little bit of time. So maybe Rivers and Smith and Lance Stevenson, all those guys, they can build that cohesive and that chemistry that the Clippers need to be competitive out west.
All right, the Los Angeles Clippers riding a 2-game winning streak as we're talking with you here on the Baseline NBA podcast at 18-13. However, the loss of Blake Griffin, a chilling blow, excuse me. But would it be a killing blow? We're not too sure. I mean, you got Chris Paul, you've got DeAndre Jordan, you got JJ Redick and Jay Smooth, Jay Crossover, and Doc Rivers. And I mean, that still should mean a successful campaign until the return of Blake Griffin. But this team has been up and down through the course of this year, so who knows where this team might fall or land when the big all-star returns. You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA is our segment of The Drop. And Shaw, the second topic that we have on the Drop, nice little interesting find, my friend. Mark Spears from Yahoo Sports had an opportunity to write an article with reference to an assessment that was made by ABC, ESPN analyst, NBA analyst Mark Jackson, former coach for Steph Curry. And in one of the games, he basically said, and I'm going to quote this so that you can kind of work your finagle your analytical side here, Shaw. This is what Mark Jackson said with reference to Steph Curry's game right now. He says, understand what I'm saying when I say this. He's hurting the game. And what I mean by that is I go into these high school gyms. I watch these kids. And the first thing they do is they run to the three-point line. You're not Steph Curry. Work on the other aspects of the game. Now, Curry was asked about this, and clearly, he's a very reserved person. He's not going to throw anybody, make snark comments or anything like that. And also, he still loves Mark Jackson, right? But he did look very confused when that comment was brought to his attention, and he said, I'll have to talk to him. Now, Shaw, when you hear those comments from Mark Jackson, is there any validity to what he's saying that Steph Curry is hurting the game of basketball?
I think I understood what he was trying to say, and there's been a bunch of people, Reggie Miller and some of the others out there who have supported Mark in his statement. He's saying not in the raw sense of the term that Steph Curry is, hurting the game per se. It's just that people think that they can beat Steph Curry. But that's one of the greatest things about what Curry's been able to do is people identify with him because he is slight of build. He's only, 6'3", quote unquote, if you will. And he's not this big muscular hulking, athletic phenomenon running up and down the court. What he is a very, very skilled basketball player who's honed his game to be as dominant as he has been. I think Mark Jackson was just trying to say that you can't just go out here and jack up threes the way that Steph Curry does. Curry has earned the right to do that because he's worked hard on his game. And he's saying he's going into, like you said, going into gyms and watching these young guys out there trying to be what Steph Curry is. And again, you have to put the work in. And Curry wasn't just this guy overnight. He's worked over his entire life to be as good as he is right now. So in that aspect, I understood what Mark Jackson was saying. But for him to say it on a national televised game in the manner in which he said it just came out poorly worded, I guess is the best way to say it for myself here. And that's why I think there's so much controversy surrounding the statement itself.
Well, look, you're being nice. I'm not going to be nice. And I love Mark Jackson. I'm not going to go all Stephen A. love. Like, that's my brother from another mother. I used to visit his mom's place, sit down and have potato salad and barbecue ribs. And I don't know Mark Jackson, okay? But I loved Mark Jackson. I love what Mark Jackson represented to the game of basketball because he was the consummate guard that would involve everyone. He didn't have to be the superstar, but he made superstar plays when it mattered the most, when his superstars couldn't make plays. What I don't appreciate about what Mark Jackson was saying is he's saying, well, I go into these high school gyms and I watch these kids and the first thing that they do is they run to the three-point line. Well, guess what? The last time I checked, Steph Curry is a grown man who goes into the basketball court, runs to the three-point line and shoots threes. Why? Because he shoots threes and he's a grown man. Now, if his coach, Steve Kerr, Luke Walton, came up and said, Steph, I don't want you shooting threes because you're employed by that team, you don't go up there and you don't shoot threes. Steph understands that. He knows that. To me, it's apples and oranges. That's on the coaches. The coaches shouldn't be having these kids run up to the three-point line and shoot threes unless they're enamored by what Steph Curry does. You need to know what kind of players you have on your basketball team. So I'm not just going to say that these kids, if anything, we can take this back to, I want to be like Mike. Gatorade made a ton of money off of it. Nike's made a ton of money off of it. I don't hear Mark Jackson saying, well, these kids shouldn't go out and aspire to be like Michael Jordan. You know, to me, it's apples and oranges. I understand where he was coming from. I think we both understand where he's coming from. But to me, to use Steph Curry and Steph Curry's name in the height of his success at the expense of saying what he does is hurting the game of basketball, to me now, you're making a situation that could actually be more of a conversation piece between how you should be coaching young kids and how the game of NBA basketball is being played right now. You're basically splitting hairs to where you're now causing a much greater divide than there needs to be. The way that the games are being played in high school basketball to some level and degree, still far outcries what even these kids are prepared to do for college or what they're even prepared to do for the NBA. And if anything, Mark Jackson should have clarified that aspect of it when he used these words, I go into these high school gyms. Because guess what? Most of those kids in high school still aspire to play like what the great players right now are doing in the NBA, the Kevin Durant's, okay, the Russell Westbrooks. We would have been talking about, Russell Westbrook is hurting the game of basketball because all he does is run up to the floor and jack up shots when he's standing next to a better shooter in Kevin Durant. I don't hear Mark Jackson saying anything about that. So why is he doing that specifically for Steph Curry?
Well, there's an interesting caveat to this, too, because I think no matter what Mark Jackson says, especially when he says something about the Golden State Warriors,
it always seems like it's scorn talk.
It's a jilted lover, kind of, making his comments, if you will. So, again, I agree. There's that statement was more about the development of basketball. And then there's an interesting stat that I think I was watching the telecast. I think it was ESPN, and maybe it was Jalen Rose who even said it specifically. And I'm probably going to get it wrong a little bit, but it was something to the effect that Curry has taken as many three-pointers as he has, I guess, shots in the paint, if you will, because they're talking about Curry being, I think, third or fourth in the league in terms of scoring in the paint, if you will. And he's the only guy that's under like 6'5" in the last X amount of years that has as high a percentage as he has. Tony Parker's been a guy who scores a lot in the paint, but the percentage of what Stephen Curry is scoring in the paint is up there with DeAndre Jordan and people like that, if you will, guys who only take shots, for 2-3 feet away from the basket. So that was a point that even I, as a guy who follows the game very closely, didn't even realize the type of historic season Stephen Curry is having. And when you take that into consideration with what Mark Jackson said, we kind of pointed out and signaled out the three-point shooting, and then that almost made it false. It almost negated it because Steph Curry does as much damage from the outside as he does from the inside. And that all goes back to his actual skill and development. And I'm 100% agree with you in terms of when you look at what these other young guys are doing out there, that's more about the system that they're in and what their coaches are allowing them to do, as opposed to Stephen Curry having that hindrance on the game, if you will.
I will agree with one thing that Mark Jackson did say. You're not Steph Curry. Work on other aspects of your game. I just think he needs to direct that to the kids in the high school gyms rather than putting the onus on Steph Curry to have to disseminate that information or that message out there. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up with regards to this, y'all, and look, and again, I'm really glad that you did kind of shed the light for us to have this platform to discuss this. But the one thing that I find it very interesting about what Mark Jackson is saying is he wants these other kids to work on other aspects of their game. Are we just suddenly absolving Steph Curry from what he's already been accomplishing over the course of the last 2 seasons to help this Golden State Warriors team win an NBA title and ultimately have the best start the best start for a franchise in NBA history almost? I mean, he does distribute the basketball. He has worked on, being, defending the ball a lot more. He's increased his steals. He's increased, he even rebounds the basketball a lot better. This frail 190-pound soaking wet basketball player that everyone seems to think is not capable of doing this, you know what? He's earned the right to shoot the ball the way that he wants to shoot it if he's capable of making it. So while I agree with Mark Jackson when he's saying, work on other aspects of your game, don't make that seem like a slight on the fact that Steph Curry is getting away with those things because he's hitting the three ball at such an alarming rate. Part of the reason why he's doing that now is because he's doing all of these other things that he's increased those numbers exponentially to give us reason to talk about why Steph Curry can be arguably one of the best players in the game of basketball right now.
mean, at the end of the day, he knew what he was doing when he said it, and knew it was going to cause controversy out there. That's why I tried to preface it a little bit, but he used a national televised audience on Christmas Day in the biggest Christmas Day game there was to say what he said. I mean, he could have been doing that any other time when maybe not doing a Golden State Warrior game, because they always have those side chatters and talking about other things in the league. But he was strategic in when he did it and what he wanted to say. And again, I think it was a little bit of an attention grabber, if you will. And obviously, it's got us talking about it, on our show as well. But again, I think we can understand what he was trying to say in it. It's just that it came out in a very, very convoluted way, if you will, in the game, that in a way that wasn't even as complimentary as it should have been to Stephen Curry.
Yeah, definitely, man. And listen, Andrew Bogut, I think, said it best. Anything he says, you can take with a grain of salt. And you know what? We do. Unfortunately, though, my food is a little salty right now because of what he said. Because again, I'm just of the personal belief that Steph Curry has earned the right to do whatever it is that he feels is necessary to do for his team to win basketball games. And I tell you this right now, sometimes it means sacrificing shooting the basketball the way that he does, and he's shown that he's done that. And I think that should be put as an emphasis for some of these young kids to learn and understand. You don't have to score 30 points to have an effect on a basketball game. Steph Curry has shown you that. It's why we still talk about him as being an MVP. We can't say that about a James Harden right now, who was the MVP runner-up. You can see when he is not shooting the basketball, when he's not using the basketball, he can almost be virtually useless for the Houston Rockets because he doesn't put an effort on other aspects of his game. And it affects a team that last year was the second best team in the NBA, in the Western Conference. So when I look at something like that and I look at someone like Mark Jackson, scoring or no scoring, to me, I just didn't think that it was said properly enough, and to use him in the way that he used them certainly pulls things completely out of context. But I want to go back to that little scoring thing that you mentioned, Shaw, real quick. Do you think that the Warriors did right by Mark Jackson despite what happened? We've talked about this before, with Tony Dungy building, a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then John Gruden coming in and helping them win a championship. Organizations doing right by the former coaches to acknowledge what was done. Do you think the Warriors did that a little bit? That might have spurned a little bit about Mark Jackson's harsh thoughts a little bit about the Warriors since he's left?
Well, I think Mark Jackson doesn't feel he was done correctly at all. But I mean, hindsight is 20/20, as they say, and it's hard to say that they didn't do right by him, especially because now this team is a championship level team. So I look at it from that standpoint. If Mark Jackson was still there and was still coaching that team, do the Golden State Warriors become NBA champions? And again, we'll never know. But in this situation, Mark Jackson definitely feels he was wrongfully ousted, if you will, given all the things. But he was rubbing people the wrong way, and I don't know if we can dispute that one way or the other. If you rub the owner the wrong way and the GM, and those things aren't together, then what else is there to say? No matter how good of you are, this thing about basketball, this thing about sports, is it's always going to be a relationship business. And if you cannot get along with those who you quote unquote serve, it doesn't matter how much talent you have, you will eventually find yourself out the door.
You think Steph Curry is going to actually talk to Mark Jackson? I mean, I think the only way that's going to happen is if he actually picks up a cell phone. I don't think they're going to have any kind of personal heart to heart, if you ask me.
No, I don't think it's something that that even warrants that. I'm sure he and Steph still have a relationship. They were very close and probably still are very close. And again, I think that's something that they'll talk about off air, and something that we'll never even know that happens when it does.
All right. Well, if that ever does happen, there may be another conspiracy theory coming on. Nah, we just fine. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. That's right.
All right. Out in Dallas, Mr. Nowitzki, notch another one in the accolades belt, moves up to 6th place on the all-time scoring list. Shaw, remarkable achievement for the German sharpshooter.
That guy is unreal, and he continues to have an amazing season, passing Shaquille O'Neal on the list. And a lot of people just don't even realize that Dirk Nowitzki is doing all of these things right now from an offensive standpoint. Congratulations to him. Salute for what he's been able to do through his career. Obviously going to be a first-round Hall of Fame policy.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, man. It's just a remarkable career by a remarkable player, and continues to make this Dallas Mavericks team look good. And the numbers don't jump out at you, But I mean, again, he puts in that work, man, and he brings a professionalism to the game. And I know that's Mark Cuban's son that he never had, boy. Ever since he had him, he's just been all smiles, and so is the Mavericks faithful. Out in Philly, Shaw, via way of New Orleans. You know, we talked about this dude at the beginning of the year, the impressive play of Ish Smith. I don't know what they were thinking when they dropped this guy, but clearly Philadelphia was so desperate to get a guard for their organization that they decided to pick him up. And lo and behold, the Philadelphia 76ers have two basketball wins under their belt for this season. Is that because of Ish Smith?
Well, they were 1-30 without Ish Smith, and now they're 1-0 with Ish Smith as is according of the show. So yeah, let's go give Smith all the props and credit for what he's been able to do in one game. You know, I think he had 14 points, 5 assists in his debut. When Nerlens Noel was already complimenting him, saying he sees a difference already, a guy who really knows how to run the team. That's kind of a slight to some of the other guys on the roster already, but nevertheless, you know, one of the things that shocked me with this trade is it obviously signifies that, you know, Coach D'Antoni, who was hired on as an associate head coach to help Brett Brown, and then Al Colangelo was there as well. They were starting to make this move, and D'Antoni was really behind the Ish Smith signing, and it also signaled the end of the Tony Roten era, who was waived as a result of Ish Smith being acquired by the Philadelphia 76ers. So we'll see what happens from here on out. Hope Tony Roten finds another job sometime soon, but, you know, kudos to Smith and what he's been able to do for Philly as well.
Yeah, Tony Roten went rotten, and you know what? Smith is the ish out in Philly. Brett Brown loves it. I'm sure the Philadelphia 76ers fans love it equally as well. All right, Shaw. The All-Star balloting is in, and already the shenanigans have begun. Kobe Bryant leads in first returns of All-Star voting. Are we making much of the Mamba's farewell tour with the ridiculousness of him leading in the All-Star vote go-getting? Like, seriously, is this like a mercy voting?
All I can do is Kanye shrug here, bro. I mean, I think we all knew this was coming. We talked about it when Kobe announced his retirement, that we were sure that he was going to be in the All-Star game. I didn't know that he'd necessarily lead all vote getters right now, beating out LeBron, KD, even Stephen Curry at this point. But nevertheless, we knew he was going to be there one way or the other. So I guess it's just kind of the sign of the times, a farewell tour, if you will. The fans are saying, you know what, we want to make sure you're in Toronto.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry. All I keep thinking about is Kobe Bryant with the hood on, like Assassin's Creed. And the fact that he's got a new Shark Tank, and that's the only reason why people are voting for him. You know, a new Mamba commercial and the Shark Tank. That's basically it. All right, out in Utah, bad news out there for Burke fans. Alec Burke, he is out indefinitely with a fractured left fibula. You know, Quinn Snyder's had to kind of finagle with his group. He's now lost Gobert, and now he's lost Burke. You know, this is still a good Jazz ball club, man, but they're dropping like flies out there in Utah. Is this going to stymie, you know, their expectations of being a playoff contending basketball team?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I mean, they're out there fighting, and, you know, they had a miraculous second half last year, and they just need to be healthy to get things right. Gordon Hayward hasn't played up to expectations, I think, from an offensive or defensive standpoint this year. But now with Brooks going down, I think he's going to have an opportunity to do a little bit more from that side of the basketball, because he likes to defer a little bit. And Alec Brooks comes out there and he likes to score. He likes to shake things up. So I think Gordon would be the guy who would probably be the biggest benefactor of Alec being out. And the rest of this team should just kind of fall in line behind Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see, though, the innovation of Quinn Snyder to get these guys to play better offensive basketball. I still think that they're struggling. And quite honestly, now that Gobert is not in the starting lineup, you know, to me, this team would need to be a little bit more offensively oriented. Don't you think, Shaw?
Absolutely, man. I think with that, you know, you look at a team with, and not say Derek Favors, who has actually played pretty well this season, and again, Hayward as well. You would think those two guys would really take the offensive load, and again, exactly what you're saying. Maybe they push the tempo a little bit, but Snyder seems to like them in a defensive mindset, if you will. And they're still being able to do that at times, and they have been pretty stingy. But offensively, they haven't been quite as good as you would expect them to be. And I think we might see that maybe start to let the reins come off a little bit now that they have, you know, a guy like Alec Burke come out. They have to figure out a way to manufacture some offense, and that might even mean a guy like Trey Burke gets more of an opportunity to score the basket.
Definitely, man. All right, and finally, Shaw, out in Toronto, Jonas Valanciunas is set to return to Raptors. They're looking pretty good, winning 2 straight so far, and they're also expecting to get DeMar Carroll back. This team becomes a fully healthy team, Shaw. I mean, how formidable can this Raptors team be with the recent play of Ross, Rosen, and Lowry heading this Raptors team who currently lead in the Atlantic Division?
Well, I mean, shout out to them. They really have held things down with two of their starting guys out of the lineup for a significant amount of time. Carroll's already back. Valanciunas is set to return this week. So we'll definitely see if they can keep things going. And I'll be the first one to eat a little bit of crow. I didn't think Terrence Ross was going to be able to fill in. He has done, a very, very good job for them on both sides of the basketball. But shout out also to Bismack Biyombo, who's filled in marvelously since Jonas Valanciunas has been out. It'll be interesting to see how those two guys now kind of coexist with each other, with Valanciunas being back full strength.
All right, the Toronto Raptors 11-5 in their conference, looking pretty good right now, and equally as good as the home team as they are in a road team, but full strength. Definitely could be one of those playoff tough teams in the playoffs that'd be difficult to knock out, given the way that they've been playing defensively and offensively. Awesome show this week, Shaw, man. I'm telling you, really just an excellent way for us to bring the New Year's to a close, bring the year to a close as we start embarking onto the new year, man. And so much stuff is happening right now. Players going down, players coming back, fluctuation within each of the conferences. And you know what, Shaw? I think the one good thing too, the level of play, I think, is a little bit more balanced. We're not talking about the Eastern Conference as the Eastern Conference any longer. I think that one thing that people have to start respecting is that there are really some good Eastern Conference teams, and that they can match up against some of these Western Conference teams. Even though from a talent perspective, the Western Conference is still the better conference, I think we're starting to see a much more balanced league again. And that just bodes well, man, because it comes down to the second half of the season and trades and stuff. It means a lot more movement, a lot more activity.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've discussed previously, kind of in passing, almost like we're doing right here now as well. The Eastern Conference has definitely surprised everybody. I think everybody out there to this point. Everyone just said, "Oh, it was only the first couple games," but now we know we're more than a quarter way into the season, and the Eastern Conference records are really, really up there. And kudos to everybody out there. From even in the Atlantic Division to the Southeast, people have really stepped up, and I'm glad to see that's the case, because we definitely wanted to have a great and exciting brand of basketball in both conferences. And I think the Western Conference has taken a little bit of a step back one way or the other, whether that's personnel, coaching, chemistry, whatever it is. That just seems to be the case right now. So it's great to see that both conferences are kind of almost equal, in terms of strength, even though we do have a kind of a top three when it comes to, real contenders out there for the NBA championship.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. And again, as we start embarking to the new year, I really do think that, this is no fluke with what we're seeing from some of these teams. And one of the things I really do love more than anything is how these teams are starting to come into form with an identity of who they are, what is going to make them tick. And I think you're going to see a variety of matchup styles that just bodes well for quality games to be watched through the course of the year. Once again, we'd like to thank our man, Tim Tompkins from the DriveandDish Podcast. Once again, man, these guys do an excellent job covering and discussing the NBA. Myself and Shaw, we've been on their show and we've had a blast, and we just love when they come on our show and really dig in and help us go over a lot of the stuff happening in the league. So we'd like to send a shout out to them. Be sure to check them out and check out their show, man. They're always doing their thing. And we'd like to thank you and yours. Once again, 2015 has been a remarkable season. A lot of room of improvement for the Baseline NBA podcast. And we expect to do bigger and better things for 2016, and we're doing it because of you. So for the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we'd like to wish you guys a happy new year, and we can't wait to catch up with you soon, only on the Baseline.